You're 19 when the sky burns for the first time. Smoke curls from the horizon, and the air smells of iron and ash. You were told the war would be glorious, that your uniform would make you a man, that your country would rise again. But standing in a frozen field outside Smolensk, your hands shaking around a rifle too heavy for your thin arms, you wonder what glory looks like when the world is on fire. You joined because everyone did. Because posters promised honor. Because your father said it was your duty. Because fear and pride can sound the same when shouted loud enough. They gave you boots that blistered your feet, a helmet that didn't fit, and a number to wear on your belt. You marched east with hundreds of others, singing songs you didn't believe in. At night, you whispered your mother's name like a prayer. The first man you saw die wasn't an enemy. It was your friend, Lucas, shot through the neck by a sniper you never saw. He fell without a sound. You pressed your hand to the wound, but it was like trying to hold water. When he stopped breathing, you realized the world had just split in two. Before and after. You buried him in the snow with your bayonet. No cross, no words, just silence. That night, you stopped singing. The war drags on. You stop counting days. You stop feeling your fingers. You learn how to march hungry, how to sleep standing up, how to look away when someone doesn't get up again. You learn that courage isn't loud. It's the small act of not collapsing. Then one morning, everything ends. The artillery falls silent. Your company is gone. You're found in the woods by men in strange uniforms, Americans. Their guns steady, but their faces young, like yours. They shout at you in English, a language you barely understand. You raise your hands and feel your body go weightless. You think of Lucas, of your mother, of all the things you'll never explain. You're a soldier no more. You're a prisoner. They march you to a camp surrounded by barbed wire and wooden towers. It smells of damp earth and human fatigue. They take your watch, your papers, your boots. You're given a tag with a number, a tin cup, and a blanket that smells of smoke. You sleep in a barrack with men who cough through the night. The walls creak with cold. The lice come first, then the hunger. Days become patterns. Roll call. Soup. Work. Silence. Sleep. You dig trenches, mend fences, carry lumber. You do what you're told because obedience is the only language left to speak. Some guards are cruel, others indifferent. You learn to read moods, like weather. When to keep your head down, when to move slow, when to disappear into stillness. At night, you dream of bread. Not your mother, not home, not even freedom, just warm bread, soft in the center, the kind you haven't tasted in years. When you wake, the taste lingers like grief. You're 21 when you start keeping count again, not of days, but of men. The ones who stop eating, the ones who stop speaking, the ones who stare too long at the fence and don't look away. You learn that dying isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, like a candle going out. You meet a man named Otto, older than the rest. He used to teach history before the war. Now he mends uniforms with a bent needle and hums lullabies under his breath. He tells you stories of ancient Rome, of empires that thought they'd last forever. He says history always repeats, just with different flags. You don't know if he's comforting you or warning you. One day, the Americans bring a group of local villagers to the camp. They make you line up. The villagers look at you like they're counting ghosts. One woman spits at your feet. You recognize the hatred in her eyes. You've seen it before, but never pointed at you. That night, you can't sleep. You realize you're part of something monstrous, even if you never meant to be. Winter comes again. The snow hides the barbed wire like a lie trying to be forgotten. You're thinner now, your skin yellowed, your ribs sharp under the blanket, but your mind is sharper. You start writing letters in your head, to your mother, to Lucas, to God. You tell them about the frost on the windows, about Otto's stories, about how the sky here feels too big. You never write them down. There's no paper, and maybe that's for the best. You're 23 when the war ends. You hear it first as a rumor, then as laughter, then as tears. The guards no longer shout. They just walk slower, as if the air has turned heavy. The commander gathers you all and says it's over. No more Reich, no more orders, no more war, just silence. You expect to feel joy, but instead you feel nothing. How do you celebrate when you've forgotten who you are? Months pass before you're allowed to leave. They give you papers stamped, Entlassung, release, and a coat too big for you. You walk out through the same gate you once thought was the edge of the world. No one stops you. No one says goodbye. You travel west by train. The countryside is broken, fields blackened, towns half burned, bridges twisted like ribs. Every station smells of smoke and hunger. You see children begging for bread, women carrying buckets of ashes where homes used to be. You wonder if you're coming home or just moving through another kind of prison. When you reach your village, it's smaller than you remember. Your father is gone. Your mother's hair has turned white. She stares at you like she's afraid to believe it's really you. You try to smile, but your face doesn't remember how. That night, she makes soup with too much water and not enough salt. You eat in silence. When she finally asks, "Did you kill anyone?" you don't answer. You both pretend the question never left her mouth. You're 26 and the war is over, but the war inside you isn't. You wake at night to the sound of boots that aren't there. You see barbed wire in your dreams. You still count footsteps when you walk. You still flinch when someone shouts. You don't wear your uniform anymore, but you can't quite take it off either. You work rebuilding houses, brick by brick, wall by wall, trying to make something solid out of what's left. Sometimes the other men talk about the past with bitterness, sometimes with pride. You say nothing. You've learned that silence is safer than memory. Otto writes you once from another camp, farther south. He says he's been teaching again, that his students are different now, hungry for truth instead of glory. He says maybe this time history won't repeat. You don't know if you believe him, but you hope he's right. You're 30 when you marry a woman who lost her brother in the war. She never asks you which side you fought on. Maybe she doesn't want to know, or maybe she already does. You have a son. When he's 5, he finds your old dog tags in a drawer and asks what they are. You tell him they're just metal. You don't tell him they once decided who lived and who didn't. Years pass. Germany changes. Borders shift. Leaders fall. Flags burn. You learn to live quietly, to fix what can be fixed and bury what can't. You never talk about the camp, about Lucas, about the woman who spat at you. You never talk about guilt. But sometimes, when the wind rattles the window, you think of the men still behind the wire, of the ones who never came home. You whisper their names, just to make sure someone still remembers. You're 50 when your son asks what the war was like. You tell him it was loud. You tell him it was cold. You tell him it was long. You don't tell him it was senseless. You don't tell him it turned boys into ghosts. He nods, writes a report for school, and you're relieved when he moves on. But that night, you dream of snow again. You're 70 when you visit the old camp. It's a museum now. There's a ticket booth, a tour guide, a plaque with names you don't recognize. The barracks smell of varnish instead of sweat. Children walk through with notebooks and bottled water. You stand by the fence and touch the rusted wire. It feels smaller than you remember. You realize the cage was never the fence. It was the years that followed. You leave a piece of paper at the memorial. On it, you write, "I was here, I lived, I learned." You don't sign your name, you don't need to. You're 80 when you stop counting winters. Your hands tremble when you hold a cup. You sit by the window and watch the sky change colors. When you close your eyes, you see faces. Lucas, Otto, your mother. You hear the sound of boots on snow, the bell at dawn, the voice of a guard calling your number. You breathe in and let it go. You're no longer a soldier or a prisoner or a sinner. You're just a man who lived long enough to understand what that means. And when the light fades, you see the world not as enemies and allies, but as people, all of them trying to survive something they never asked for. The war is over. It has been for decades. But somewhere, deep inside the silence, the boy who raised his hands in a frozen field finally lowers them.